Good evening. My name is Carlos Vargas-Ramos. I will be presenting this evening on a research brief that we have recently released to the public entitled Redistricting 2020 Challenges to Hispanic Congressional Representation in New York State. Every 10 years, the Constitution of the United States calls for the apportionment of seats in the House of Representatives. This reallocation of political power in the US Congress is based on the changes in population nationally every 10 years, and the primary reason for which the decennial census is conducted. The Constitution calls for representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included in this union according to their respective numbers. New York State currently has 27 representatives in the US House of Representatives. While the 2020 decennial census data is not yet available, we can extrapolate about national and state level trends based on the changes in population from year to year and between 2010 and 2019. Because of the population changes nationally, New York State is likely to lose one representative and possibly two. The present analysis is based on the extrapolation from 2010 and 2019 population data from the US Census Bureau. Between 2010 and 2019, the US population grew by 6%, but New York State grew at a much slower rate than the country as a whole and the vast majority of other states. In contrast to New York, other states around the country, particularly on the South, mountain states, and in the West, they grew at rates sometimes twice the national rate of growth for the population. These states will increase their congressional representation. New York State, on the other hand, will likely lose congressional representation. These changes in congressional representation following this pattern of geographical distribution is something we already saw in previous apportionment processes after the 2010 census. At that time, states in the Northeast, including New York, as well as the Midwest, lost congressional representation because of population losses. On the other hand, states in the Southeast, Southwest, and Northwest increased their congressional representation, all as a result of population gains. New York State has been losing congressional representation since its political power peaked in 1940. Since 1990 alone, the state has lost two congressional districts each decade. But because of its very low population growth, we expect New York State to lose one and maybe two congressional districts in the post-2020 apportion. If New York State is going to lose one or two congressional districts, where in the state will these districts be lost? What geographic regions of the state will be affected? What population groups within the state may be affected? These are some of the subjects that we will be discussing in tonight's presentation. As of 2019, New York State had an estimated 19.3 million people. But between 2010 and 2019, most of the counties of the state, 49 out of 62, lost population. All of these 49 counties were located upstate or in eastern Long Island. As figure 1 shows, the geographic distribution of this population change with counties in red, orange, and yellow showed a decrease in population, while the countries in blue, mostly downstate, show that they are increasing in population. Population change in New York State is driven by two leading trends: the decrease in the non-Hispanic white population and the increase in the Hispanic as well as the non-Hispanic Asian population. Non-Hispanic whites represented the majority of the state population in 2019, 55%. Hispanics, on the other hand, represented 19%, non-Hispanic blacks represented 14%, and non-Hispanic Asians represented 9%, almost 9% of the state's population. New York State gained just under 54,000 people between 2010 and 2019, but Hispanics increased by more than 319,000 persons, or a 9% increase. Non-Hispanic Asians increased by more than 259,000 people, or more than 17%. On the other hand, non-Hispanic whites decreased by more than 582,000 people, or 5% of their growth, of their numbers. Non-Hispanic blacks decreased by more than 15,000 people, or 0.5% loss. The growth of the Hispanic and Asian population and the decline of the non-Hispanic white population largely drive the population dynamics in New York State, as I have just reiterated. The non-Hispanic white population declined in 59 of 62 counties throughout the state. In New York City, their decline centered in Queens and the Bronx. The growth took place in Kings County and in New York County. The non-Hispanic, Asian, and Latino population each only lost population in one county, Tioga County for Asians, Kings County for Hispanics. At the congressional district level, population change between 2010 and 2019 ranged between a gain of 8% in district number 8, and a loss rather of 4% in the 23rd district in upstate New York. Of the 27 congressional districts in New York, 14 districts saw their population increase, while 12 districts lost population. One district didn't really have any change in population. 5 of the congressional districts that saw population decline were located downstate, 3 in New York City, 2 in Long Island. The remaining 7 districts with declining population were all located upstate, 1 in the Catskill or Hudson Valley region, 1 in the North Country, 2 in the Finger Lakes region, 1 in the Southern Tier, 1 containing Rochester, and 1 containing Buffalo. The non-Hispanic white population decreased in 22 congressional districts, shown in figure 5 in yellow, orange, or red. Notice that the biggest drop in the non-Hispanic white population in congressional districts took place in districts represented by Representatives Meng, the 6th district, or Ocasio-Cortez, the 14th district. The non-Hispanic white population increased in only 5 districts. In districts represented by Congressman Espaillat, the 13th, Congressman Jeffries, the 8th, Congressman Torres, the 15th, Congresswoman Velasquez, the 7th, and Congresswoman Clark, the 9th. The Hispanic population grew in 26 districts across the state, and it decreased in only 1 district, district number 7, represented by Representative Velasquez. Non-Hispanic Asians increased in 26 districts and decreased in 1, also a district represented by Representative Velasquez, number 7. Non-Hispanic Blacks increased in 16 districts and declined in 11. In terms of Hispanic vulnerability, which is the core and the substance of this representation, we are concerned that 3 congressional districts statewide that lost population are represented by Hispanics, the 7th, the 14th, and the 19th. 1 district is represented by a representative with long seniority and standing, Representative Velasquez, the 7th district. But 2 districts are not, since they are only represented, or they have been represented rather, by representatives who've been in office for only 1 full term. These are Representative Delgado of the 19th district and Representative Ocasio-Cortez of the 14th district. 2 districts, on the other hand, represented by Hispanics, grew in population, but the concern with these districts is that because they are adjacent to districts that lost population, and because one of these districts that gained population will be represented by a newly elected representative, they may be vulnerable to redistricting. Because of the loss of population and how these districts are adjacent to other districts that have gained population but have newly elected representatives, Hispanic representatives may be vulnerable to have their districts redrawn and consolidated, pitting those representatives with others in adjacent districts who may not enjoy the weight and influence incumbency may provide. Districts with the most population loss, the 23rd, the 22nd, the 21st, represented by non-Hispanic white representatives, are adjacent to each other and to other districts that lost population as well. So we may want to look at these districts as potentially engaged in this consolidation of districts as a result of population loss. A loss of Hispanic congressional representation is highly undesirable. New York would have lost population and even more congressional representation had it not been for the growth of the Hispanic population. Instead, the state of New York increased its population marginally as a result of the large growth of the Hispanic population. Therefore, congressional redistricting in New York should prevent the disenfranchisement of the growing Hispanic population. Congressional redistricting should not come at the expense of Hispanic representation. Neither should it come at the expense of other groups that have struggled for the equal and equitable representation throughout the decade. Safeguarding Hispanic legislative representation in the redistricting process is an important community goal. Hispanic voters repeatedly support and elect Hispanic candidates when given the opportunity to do so. Just as important is the goal of preserving or attaining meaningful influence as constituents and voters, even when no Hispanic candidate runs for elected office. Redistricting bodies, such as the New York State Independent Redistricting Commission, but ultimately the New York State Legislature must strive to create legislative districts of maximum Hispanic political influence. Thank you.